Hello, I am Michael Marsh. Welcome to the program dedicated to reestablishing constitutional government, first in Oregon, and then hopefully we'll get the United States Constitution going again. They're both on the books. We just need people that in office that'll honor their oath. The legislature is in session right now, so we're in danger. So I've invited Nick Williams here of Salem Chamber of Commerce, and he's been following the legislature, and so from a business point of view, and so I've asked him to present that view here today. We'll talk about some of the bills that have already been passed and some of the ones that are coming down the pike. Nick, tell us a little bit about your background and the Chamber of Commerce itself.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to be here with you, Michael. I appreciate that, and the opportunity to talk to Salem whenever it presents itself about the Salem Chamber and the work that we do. I started my love for civics and that political sandbox when I was in middle school. I had a teacher that just really kind of tugged on that heartstring for me, and as I progressed on through school, I served in a student government capacity and went to my first Dorchester conference when I was a senior in high school. So, and that carried on through college, and I've always had an interest. The Salem Chamber is the first place where I've been able to turn that interest into action, and so here I am. My background, completely private sector, sales and marketing background, spent some time in insurance, and primarily just dealing with people. And that's what politics is it's dealing with people, and to a degree, I guess one could say that politics is sales. You know, essentially you're attempting to align people's thoughts and actions with those of yours. Personally, I'm a smaller government guy. I believe that serves our business community best, and that led me to a strong passion to work with the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce, because that's what we go to work to do every day, is allow our local private sector businesses to operate as freely as they can, to employ as many people as possible, and return as many dollars back into our local economy as possible. So, and you mentioned the legislature. With the Salem Chamber, we're really unique. We have about 1,300 member businesses, nonprofits, and they're very diverse. We're an association for businesses and organizations, and that makes the work that we do very tailored to things that are going to have an impact on the majority of our members. So the common thread that we use that helps us define whether or not we're going to engage in certain measures or candidate races or whatever the case may be, the question we ask ourselves is, how will this particular measure, bill, legislative concept, or come candidate election time, this particular candidate, affect our local private sector's ability to either create or maintain jobs? That's our governing principle, and that's where we become engaged in the political space.
So, along those lines, I know the Democrats are planning to. I don't think they've done anything on it yet, but they, once they get to it, it will probably pass as things stand now. They want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I'm suspecting, having been on both ends of that, both an employer and an employee, that's going to be a little bit disastrous. How do you see that as dealing with the business community and hiring people and keeping people employed?
Well, the simple answer to that is you're right. It does have potentially disastrous ramifications attached to it. There is this big misconception that exists currently, I think, with just the makeup of our current legislature, And that misconception is that employers do not like their employees. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Recently, our organization on this issue and on one other that I'm sure we'll get to a little later, we asked for feedback from our members on a higher minimum wage, and I just brought a few of those letters with me. I'll summarize a couple here, but there's a fella, he's a member of our organization. He has about 10 employees currently. He has a small property management company, does pretty well, but he'd like to grow. And when asked about minimum wage, he said, as a business owner, I'm constantly striving, as it is, to provide the best opportunities for my employees in order to keep them and to fulfill my commitment to them. He says, in my opinion, you would be creating an unfair advantage for the larger companies that can absorb these costs. And the costs that he's speaking to in this case is an increased minimum wage. There are 9 bills that are currently floating around the legislature right now which have to do with increasing the minimum wage, whether it be there are some bills that are in the $10 range. Currently, I believe we're at $9.25 for minimum wage. Some of these bills are in the $10 range. Others are in the $15 by 2018. So it's a phase-in bill, and everything in between. Some other feedback that we have received has to do with decisions that business owners are going to have to make in the event that a higher minimum wage is passed. One of our members has a small business, 70 full-time employees and 200 part-time employees, multiple locations, very well-known business here in the Salem-Keizer area. And he's speaking to minimum wage and paid sick leave, and he says, both of these proposals will add substantial costs to my overhead. If these proposals become law, he must either find a way to cut costs or raise prices. Neither will be easy to do. And that is really what we're doing, is we're legislating businesses and decision makers into making tough decisions. So for this particular employer, one thing that he's experimenting with is a vending service at the front door of all of his locations. And what this would do is it would take away some of his part-time staff that greet people, you know, that friendly face when you first walk in. And when folks walk in, they might need something to eat, something to drink, whatever. He's exploring the possibility of moving toward a vending service. I frequent this business multiple times a week. They generally have 2 to 3 people there at the front desk. And while a nice touch, you have to figure somewhere in the realm of $30 to $40 an hour over an 8-hour day, or actually they're open a lot longer than 8 hours, but let's say $300 a day just to keep the front desk open. Multiply that, you know, on through the year, and then multiple locations. I believe he has 5 locations in the Salem-Keizer area. All of them operate the same way. So what he's talking about is he could eliminate $200,000 wages in today's costs simply by moving toward a vending service. And if the proposed legislation is adopted, replacing these same employees could represent $300,000 in annual savings to this business. Tough decisions, but those are the types of things that people are contemplating.
And I know, for instance, stores and restaurants, they do a lot of, you know, at least starting with, you know, minimum wage. And if it's $15 an hour, that price of the goods or the service is going to have to go up. And how do they stay in business? If, you know, like at a retail store or like a restaurant, or a fast food restaurant or something. Because people aren't going to want to pay that extra, and the price would have to go up, because these are people-oriented jobs.
That's well. You teed me up for another great letter, great perspective from one of our members. This woman owns a local restaurant, not a franchise. Just she started it about 4.5 years ago, and she wrote. And again, this is a letter that's going to go to our area delegation, both in the House and the Senate. And she says, "My and most restaurants have a very slim profit margin. Mine last year was 4%. For being fairly new restaurant, I'm very happy with this." She's happy with a 4% profit margin.
Yeah.
God bless America. But she says the average for the general restaurant population is somewhere between 1 and 10%. My profit last year would not cover the increase in wages, and in fact, she would be at a $60,000 per year deficit if the minimum wage went up to $15 an hour. This doesn't even touch the increase if the mandatory compulsory sick leave legislation was passed. That would increase her payroll by another $13,000 a year. $73,000 more per year to run the business that she has owned and operated for the last 4.5 years. And she says this is not where it stops, and this is a really interesting point. She says this is not where it stops. Her produce will go up, with as many of the farmers have employees that don't make $15. Her accountant will cost her more. Her carpet cleaner will cost her more. Her window cleaner will cost her more. And her baker, baked goods, will cost more as well. All of these different things. We talk about people making $15 an hour, and we are fully in favor of people making $15 an hour. We'd love them to make more than that.
Oh, yeah.
But legislating the bottom to a point, a threshold that the market just can't bear, that's what we're talking about here. Someone recently asked me, what if they increase the minimum wage to $50 an hour? Oh man, I mean, could you imagine?
Yeah.
Well, what's the difference between 50 and 15? I mean, really, it's a number, but it's an extreme example. But by going to that high of a minimum wage, really we're just incrementally getting ourselves to that point. But for some businesses, going to a $15 an hour minimum wage is just as unrealistic as going to a $50 minimum wage.
Yeah. And the politicians say they're helping the workers at that level, but okay, say they do raise that $15. Okay, everything they buy is going to cost that much more. So that extra, $6, they're going to be paying out $7 or $8 more, and so they're really going to be losing money rather than gaining money. I have never seen it work to the benefit of people.
Yeah, it generally doesn't. And another interesting thing too, right before I came down here, I received a letter from, or an email from a director of a local nonprofit organization, a small nonprofit. A lot of nonprofit organizations, and the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit organization, we operate and fund our operations based upon the goodwill of other people. And people, many businesses have owners that are good people and are significant contributors to our local nonprofit organizations. Her concern was not only as a nonprofit organization being able to kind of fulfill the budgetary shortfalls that will exist, because nonprofits do operate on a very slim margin as well. But she also, as the executive director of this organization, had a concern with what the deficiencies within the business community were going to do and where those dollars were going to come from. I mentioned the business owner that is going to be, who is looking into kiosks to help take care of his customers. Some business owners, those dollars, those funds would actually come from their giving budget, or dollars that have been earmarked for charitable goods and charitable organizations within our community. So there's a ripple effect. You know, the $15 an hour minimum wage is kind of like the pebble in the middle of the pond, but the ripples that go out, I mean, the nonprofit example, that's one of many, many examples that will have very negative unintended consequences.
Now, you mentioned a couple times, you mentioned paid sick leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Peter Courtney, that's my senator.
Mm-hmm.
He's very much in favor of this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he's actually pushing. Tell us a little bit about how this is going to work, the way they're doing it.
Well, the initial legislative concept that was released was designed after current city ordinances that have passed in the cities of Eugene and in Portland. And so I'm going to use those as examples just to start off with. In the cities of Eugene and Portland, for every 30 hours worked, an employee is mandated to receive 1 hour of paid sick time. So by working at, you know, let's say someone works actually 40 hours a week, in a month they've accumulated almost 2 days of paid time off. Overall, it winds up being about a 3% cost in increased wages or increased compensation for that line item for businesses. The catch is that a lot of, well, up in Portland and down in Eugene, what they're noticing is people are still coming to work sick. They now get paid time off when they didn't get it before. And what's happening now is they're still coming to work sick, but they are they're taking their sick days. You know, oddly enough, the vast majority of sick days are taken on Friday and on Monday. So these, and in Portland and Eugene, there currently is no mechanism that there's no mechanism that requires like a doctor's note or anything like that. And it's first day sick pay. So it's not like you're off for 3 days and then it starts to kick in. It's the day that you're off. So I understand the heart behind it. There's a local legislator representing House District 20, Paul Evans, and I can understand where he's coming from in he believes that this is to a degree a national security issue, a little bit of a stretch from my personal perspective, but the idea is to keep sick people away from the herd of healthy people, right? Yeah. Like, so that makes sense, and I can understand where we're coming from. The problem is that the sick people are still coming around the healthy people, and they're taking their paid days off when they're healthy so they can go and enjoy it. And that's the type of an employee environment that we're creating with this type of legislation. It creates a whole other layer of checks and balances that need to be considered before passed. The rumor within the building at the Capitol, last I heard at the end of the day recently, was that they were going to move it to a 1 hour paid time off for every 40 hours worked, and then from there they were also going to make it so that employers could require their employees to provide some sort of a sick note after being gone for a number of days, and I think that number of days was somewhere around 2 or 3. So again, understanding kind of the makeup within the legislature, it's important to understand the position that we're in. And, you know, with those that are not part of kind of the pro-business community developing legislation, to have them move away from the extreme that they started from, really we've got to take the wins that we can get. Yeah. But that's really it's frankly it's very concerning that we're moving in this direction, because a number of employers they already offer paid time off. You know, you can use it for, like my employer, for example, the Salem Chamber of Commerce. I get paid time off, I can use it for sick or for personal time. And we're creating legislation and spending a lot of time and intellectual capital on something that really I'm not convinced is a problem. There are a number of bigger things out there that we could focus on, such as how do we get more businesses to move into Oregon?
Yeah.
How right now, if you're a business owner and you're thinking about relocating to a new state or even opening a business, you take a look at the different policies that exist from one state to another, and Oregon is not a very competitive place to open a business in and to do business. There was actually a quote that was in the Statesman Journal, and this was actually Kurt Schrader, Democratic congressman representing Congressional District 5 in the state of Oregon, and he said, and this is very, very insightful, and again, he's a Democrat. He said, "We're in tough shape here." Congressman Schrader said, Oregon's education system ranks near the bottom nationally. Our main port, the Port of Portland, is embroiled in a work-slowing labor dispute, which is an economic disaster for a state whose vitality depends upon trade. Rural areas are not enjoying the metropolitan area's post-recession resurgence, and there's this scandal that's forced the once venerable Governor John Kitzhaber out of office. Oregon is extremely unfriendly to business, and we're getting worse. Oregon's a great place to start a business. It's not a great place to keep a business going. He added the minimum wage was never designed to provide a minimum income for a family. By making such mistakes as conflating the minimum wage with a desired income, Democrats have perpetuated a discussion about class warfare. That's why we got our butts handed to us at the last election. That is and I've met Kurt Schrader, and I actually, while we don't agree on a whole heck of a lot, he is spot on in his assessment of the Oregon business climate currently.
And speaking of the business climate coming from the legislature, they've already passed some bills and tax raises, and they're planning more. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there have been a number of them. There have been approximately 3,000 bills that have been introduced to this point. Now, a lot of those bills will actually not make it out of their committee, but it's been a very, very busy session already. I'm going to speak to taxes and just overall anti-business legislation.
Okay.
Senate Bill 718 allows liens on personal employer property. This creates a dangerous and unfair precedent in the wage and hour arena by allowing employees to file liens on an employer's real or personal property based upon alleged yet unproven wage claims. So a person can, using this language, make a wage claim whether or not it's been proven, and that would provide the opportunity to allow an employee to file a lien on an employer's property. I mean, that's unheard of. In addition to that, Senate Bill 845, this is a fee on large employers, but fees are just nice ways to put the word tax.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 845 imposes new fees on large employers and requires employers whose employees obtain health insurance coverage through a public program to pay a fee to the state for that coverage. So there are a couple of examples. Just the general tone of this session is that it is not, there hasn't been anything that's passed that's made the business community go, yes, we won, we're feeling good about what's happening in that building. And ultimately that feeling is what we want, because that encourages, that fosters entrepreneurialism, and it fosters business growth, it fosters more people to work, and encourages sole proprietors to turn into LLCs, to turn into corporations, and employ themselves, to employing their family, to employing 15 families. It's a domino effect, and we've stopped that. We've stopped that growth with legislation. Another really potentially detrimental one, House Bill 2386, authorizes a new cease and desist authority for the Bureau of Labor and Industry. It subjects employers to potentially unjustified imposition of cease and desist orders by the Bureau of Labor and Industries, which once issued could require costly court proceedings to have removed. So what they're saying there is, we don't like your business practices, bully can come in and shut you down, and then the burden of proof actually rests on the shoulders of the business. So in order to get the open sign turned back on, the business has to go back and incur all of the legal fees that are necessary to get that judgment or to get that determination overturned. And if they're found to be wrongful in its current form, even if those allegations by bully are wrong and untrue, the business still has to pay for their own legal fees.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they would, if they really believed in that, they were doing the right thing, maybe they would change the law so that the loser pays the legal fees.
Yeah, well, and that would really change the number of potential cases that they're going to see on that issue as well. So, this is another form of a tax. House Bill 2540 requires prevailing wage in enterprise zones, and it eliminates the incentive to build projects inside of enterprise zones by requiring prevailing wage to be paid on any privately owned projects developed on private land. So for enterprise zones, it's a zoning term that's used in land use, and I'm not able to effectively articulate it. That's not my forte, but it's another mandate on how much people are going to be paid just based upon where the work is actually being done. So the list goes on and on. The Salem Area Chamber of Commerce is part of a coalition, a business coalition of significant business associations, and we're working hard every day to make sure that we're doing everything we can to move the needle on behalf of private sector employers in the Mid-Willamette Valley and also for the state of Oregon. And
we've got 23 seconds left, so I would like to ask everybody, find out who your state representative is, who your state senator is, contact them if you heard something that strikes a chord with you. Let them know how you feel, because they're going to hear from the lobbyists, but they need to hear from actual people, that have a vested interest in our community. So thank you, and God bless.